Welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast, and here with James.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
James, if I say the word psychonaut, do you know what psychonaut means?
I would say I would define myself as a psychonaut myself. Definitely exploring the mind and all that it has to offer, I guess.
What have you discovered about your own mind?
Gosh, a lot and still learning a lot. Well, I'd say probably the biggest thing for me and myself, I guess at least in my experiences, is nothing is quite like it seems until I guess it all has to do with perspective. Perspective is a very interesting thing. I know when I first started exploring about, I guess with psychedelics, I really did not know what to expect. I frankly was a little bit scared. I've always kind of had this curiosity of what is kind of this outer body experience that some of us have heard about. Um, I can still tell you I have never had that experience at this point. So I'm a little bit curious as to what that might mean for others still at this point. But I can honestly say for me, the experiences are just a great perspective tool. The older I get, I think it gives me a much better perspective of when I was younger, and truly one of those things that I feel like I'm a better person because of it. I'm a lot more emotional. I'm more in tune with my emotions, more empathetic towards others. So it's really brought a pretty unique, I guess, kind of perspective into myself and other people and just my overall understanding of the world, I would say.
How many experiences have you had?
In 2020, I can honestly say I've had a lot. Um, that was something, and I would say maybe if I had to guess, 50 experiences, maybe
Okay.
somewhere in that range. Um, I would say I'm not somebody that goes out and goes crazy, but I do and have always liked kind of pushing my limits, whether it's been sports, just any of my passions. I really enjoy that idea. And psychedelics were a perfect place for me to really kind of explore something that I just did not know much about.
Now, are we talking about like mushrooms, like certain specific ones, or?
I would say for me, my favorite one is actually LSD. I would say I have done mushrooms. I live here in Colorado, so marijuana is whether some consider that psychedelic or not, but I would say that was kind of my first pathway.
My cousin's
Maybe,
out there. He lived with us over the summer and he moved back out there and he's like, it's fucking great here. Like, why? He's like,
oh,
everything's basically illegal. You don't have to worry.
and I think that's what a lot of it, and I hope that's where the psychedelics are kind of moving, because I think there is such a negative connotation with some of this stuff, and I'm not going to say it's for everybody, because I just don't believe that to be the case. But I do genuinely believe that there are a lot of people who can get a lot of benefit from some of these things. I mean, marijuana, just as an example, and obviously 2020, there was a lot of stress out there. I believe that could just help ease some people's stress to some degree, and it's as simple as that. Um,
Well, there's a right way to take things, and sadly, everything that we get shown in movies and other things are like, I would say to the extreme probably on a lot, but that just gets brainwashed into your head. Like, what's legal out there that's insane? Salvia. I've heard
yes,
plenty of people taking that and tripping down into this. Like, one dude spent 20 years as paint on a barn, and I'm like, bro, fuck.
yes.
Like, imagine that. But like, you really start looking down into like psychedelic experiences, besides them being this like crazy like thing that it's being shown, it's very enlightening about finding yourself, because from what I've heard from past guests that have talked about it, was like it tore down the fabric of their reality that they built up in their mind to show them who they truly are and put them on this path that at least had them where they saw they were neglecting things. It showed them who they truly were, like face wise, and you could choose whether to change that or if you felt like you were in place with yourself. And I was like, that's probably got to be the scariest thing for a lot of people, because much like me and you probably know some people that like if they looked in a mirror, you wouldn't want to uncover who that person was. I mean, a lot of people are not acting the way they probably should be when it comes to just being more empathetic with others. I mean, neglecting certain things, being this, they say cutthroat, goat getting attitude or whatever. And I'm like, that's a terrible way to be if you look at the grand scheme of things. I mean, I'm in a belief that you will things in the universe or energy around us and things of that sort. But man, you walk around today, everything just seems depressed or suppressed. And it's like, it's so hard when you hear people say like, don't do this or don't do that. I'm like, but I've heard people take that and got into this new form of enlightenment and like came to my little theory. Give
Yes.
death row inmates drugs like salvia or drugs like psychedelics, because I guarantee you it's going to change their perspective on life when they go through that and then come out the other end and realize, oh my God, I did those horrible things. Like, yeah, I mean, if they're on death row, give them a little bit of drugs. See if that takes them somewhere. I mean, sometimes someone needs help trying to find that opening door, that opening path into their mind or to who they really are. A lot of people are null to the world. And you're telling me a guy who's 40 years old, spent whatever so long forgetting about everything, did this horrible act? Well, maybe he's lost. Put him on the right path.
Absolutely. I mean, and something that I've kind of read recently is, and I believe it's John Hopkins that actually it was doing the study, but they've been giving psilocybin through the mushrooms to the cancer patients, and it sounds like they really do have a much better way of accepting the situation they're in, and I can only imagine how tough that is for family members, for themselves. But the few things that I've seen, it really is a great way to accept some of the situations that we have in our world. And I can honestly say I've found that myself as well in my experiences. And I'll just kind of tell you a quick story, because it's something that I look back on, and it was not a great trip.
Is this your worst one or just a bad one?
I've here's what I would say too. I've personally never had what I would call a bad trip, or what I feel like some people call a bad trip. I am a pretty positive person, so I tend to believe like even if it's a challenging situation, there's benefit to be had from it. But I had to put a dog down years ago, and it was a situation where one, you never want to do that. It's not an enjoyable situation, but I ultimately in that trip kind of went through kind of the grieving process to say, and I won't say that it was necessarily easier, but I definitely accepted the situation more. And kind of to that point of kind of the cancer patients, is I truly believe that can give some people and even to the death row inmates. I mean, there is some form of acceptance. You're maybe forgiving yourself. You just realize that, hey, this is life, and
There's
it,
another
it
object at play. I mean, if
absolutely,
you're given a diagnosis of cancer or something like that, you think this is everything that's in your mind's view, but then that mind's view goes from this small little flashlighted thing to now it's broad spectrum opened on the concept of you go through this trip or you go through this thing that really shows you what's more out there. Sometimes people talk about experiences where they felt like they were floating out of their body and being able to
hmm,
experience everything. Once you have that in your mind, you realize, oh, maybe death isn't so bad. I mean, if you look at maybe the energy is still all around us, you're just becoming another bigger thing or bigger part of something, you know. That's why I can understand religious people, but at the same time, like it just gets stigmatized way too bad. So many people look at it like that's a bad drug that'll get you hooked. I think the DARE program definitely played a part in that. I mean,
absolutely.
they say don't do drugs, but every single thing they told you about the drugs were all these crazy, amazing side effects. Like you'll have super strength if you
Yes.
do cocaine. I'm like, hang on a second, that sounds fucking awesome.
And I think that's what I will say. It's like I kind of grew up with that same idea. I mean, I was told, hey, go play sports, never do drugs, in the DARE program myself. And as I got older, I would say I was approaching 30 before I ever really had my first experience. And a lot of the reasons I never did it in my 20s was because I had those fears, or I was told that, hey, yeah, this is just going to ruin your life, and some of the negative things that you mentioned. But then when I started dabbling into them, and I did it in what I believe was a sensible way. Um, But to me, it honestly was some of the greatest things I've experienced, because I believe you can be a professional. I believe that, like in my personal life and also in my career, I've used these to actually change some of my habits and behaviors for the better. So I think there is a lot of that's unfortunately untapped because of the war on drugs and things like that.
I look at it like, see, because I mean, for instance, a random person like myself messaging you, you got to be like, is this guy authentic, or is this guy actually
Hmm.
want to do this, or is he just looking to get some attention flick, get some debate, or get something going on? And I'm like, no, I'm generally interested because I actually want to hear people's perspectives on this, because I think everything, no matter if it's religion, no matter what it is, someone's going to try that or take something about that or try and make a decision for themselves when the time comes. And I think that's a better choice than what a lot of people are doing nowadays with high suicide rates. I mean,
Hmm.
if someone's going through something hard and a psychedelic medicine or a psychedelic mushroom is able to take them to a whole nother land, or something that makes them try and uncover who they are and give their life a new purpose or a new meaning of something, I think that's very important and that needs to be out there. But a lot of messages I was getting back from these pages, I was like, so when I was looking at yours, I was like, I hope this isn't like some dude like, hey, you looking for mushrooms? I'm like, I'm looking, but at the same time, they
Yeah.
probably need help, but still at the same time, I want to know, because people that do listen or people that might stumble across this are going to want to know about your worst experiences, know about the good experiences, want to know
Hmm.
that it's something that you need to sort for yourself because it might help you in the long run. We know everything in this world either tells you do it or don't do it, but nobody tells you try it. Like nobody ever says those
Correct.
things. And that does stop at cocaine. That does stop at like bad drugs like that. Sure. But there are
Absolutely.
some things that have been rejected by society that are now getting a second turn of things. People are starting to notice that they're not as bad as everything's been telling them it was.
And I think you're exactly right. I mean, I remember, I would say kind of the first things that I heard about LSD, which again, that's kind of my favorite form of it. And I know a lot of people have different preferences, but I know one, it overall is a pretty safe drug. So that's again what kind of made me appeal to it. I did not want something that was addictive, and I think that's what I have so much confidence in with the kind of the growth of the psychedelic age that we're kind of moving into. Is they're not a addictive drug, and I think there's so much power in that. I really do, and especially coming from kind of the medical side of things, is we don't want people to get on something and they can never get off. And I think we're seeing that with the opiate crisis now. But I'll just use like depression as another example of something that I think really could be enjoyed. Um, awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So some of my family members have had depression themselves. And one of the things that I kind of believe, but again, I'll just say some of the older generations, they had this war on drugs idea. So I believe they are very susceptible. Just, okay, let's go get the pharmaceutical, which is addictive and it causes its own issues. Where sometimes I wonder, it's like, okay, if you get like a $10 black market drug, maybe you don't even need to use that for another month. I mean, maybe that's a month-long type dose that you need. And so I think there really is a lot of potential with it. And I think you kind of hit on it as well, as it's different for every person, but I think that there is a lot of different places that this can possibly fit in, whether it's depression. Like myself, I've used it a little bit to kind of change some behaviors and change some habits. I've also done it just because I laugh more at those times than maybe ever in my life. And I'm more emotional with some of my family members at that time, which it brings out a side that maybe they don't see all the time, or I get to share with them as easily. So I think there's a lot of still untapped and probably even unknown research that, like to your point, they were doing this back in the 60s, but the war on drugs in the 70s kind of stopped all this research. And Unfortunately, I think we would have been a lot further along, whether we could have helped the veterans with the PTSD and just different things like that, that I think we're really frankly missing out, to be honest with you.
It's kind of like the scene from Pineapple Express where they were testing the
Absolutely.
subject and he started. I think the main reason is he was asking a lot of questions like, why are we underground right now? And the dude was like, oh, we can't have the questions aspect of things. And you really
Mhm.
start to look at it because for so long you'd have depression, they'd give you a pill and you'd be like, what about weed? Weed's bad, weed's bad. And then now it's
Yeah.
saying, like, oh, go get your prescription at the local dispensary. It's like, well, what the you're making the world like back and forth schizophrenic when it comes to like people's minds and actions. I mean, if a drug can help somebody in a serious situation doing a horrible act to themselves or others, why would you not give that a chance? Why would you not research that more? And it's like, it's
Correct.
crazy it's taken this long to even get as far as it's gotten. I mean, in my opinion, it should be a little bit farther. Not
Absolutely.
necessarily me partaking in it, but on the aspect of like, give people the option to. I know plenty of people. I have a local dispensary I was actually going to get a job at, and they were like, one qualification for it is you can't do weed. And I was like, so I can't smoke weed to work at a dispensary. And they're like, yeah, we don't want you taking any product home. And I'm like, you know what? If I can better help someone else's life by getting them high, then fuck it.
I agree.
What was that experience that you're talking about a story, and then what was that? You said it necessarily wasn't the worst, but it was a bad one.
Well, so you know, with when I had to put my dog down, it really was. It was something that was deeply emotional, and I do believe that the going through kind of that grieving process before I had to actually put my dog down, I honestly believe that was a very helpful experience for me. Um, so you know, and I think that probably was what I would call my worst experience, but I don't think it was a bad trip.
What
In
did you
my
see?
words, you know, I won't say I usually see a whole lot. I do get some fractal type patterns from time to time, but for me, I would say probably the benefit is kind of tapping into my emotions. Um, I would say like there's just that the deep sense of, well, at that time, it was just a deep sense of grief. And I just didn't know how to handle it. But that kind of gave me a way forward that I frankly didn't see at that time. So
Kind of
I think that was the biggest thing for me, was just kind of mentally.
kind of like when you have maybe you lose someone but you know you're upset because but you're not feeling it right now. It kind of helped you get there to that point where the grief was so you could actually mourn, you could actually cry, you could actually feel the emotion that you're supposed to be feeling. But I mean, I know people that like I lost my grandma like not even like maybe a month or so ago, so like that
Hmm.
was very traumatic. I did cry when that happened immediately, but it's
Yep,
also like you start to realize there's more grief there than you realize. And it's like that just helps you funnel it in to be able to find that and be able to express it a little bit more to actually truly get over it. Cause I know people that say they've gotten over a death that happened years ago. And then I'm like, you don't look like you're really over it, man. Like I under
absolutely.
you never truly are. So what do you have you really cried about it? Like I think Jamie Kennedy, I don't know if you remember him,
Yes.
but he talked about how when he lost his mom, it was a very hard thing, and then he lost his dad as well too, and he's like, "I didn't cry as much for my mom as I did with my dad." And they're like, What do you mean?" He goes, "I just remember sitting there knowing that, like, he's gone now. It's about a couple weeks. Do I need to cry?" And he was forcing himself to cry, and he's like, "I did a good 20 minutes, but, like, did was that morning?" And it was like,
Yeah,
yeah, sometimes, like, you gotta need something to help unlock that a little bit.
I agree. And, you know, I will always, I tell my wife all the time, it's like my emotions are something that I do struggle kind of tapping into. And this does allow some of that ease or maybe comfort to kind of do that. But one of the things that kind of fascinates me, and kind of going back to the cancer patients, is, and I kind of relate this to my dog, or that experience is, I was able to kind of grieve while that individual or that person or my dog in my instance was still with me. And I think that is a unique opportunity that and like I said, I think it's John Hopkins that when they were doing that study, but I know when I was watching this documentary or something about it, is they said that one, the cancer patient was way more accepting and willing to go into it. It was not such a challenging thing for them. But
Oh, that's
what
St. Jude's. That's St.
is
Jude's.
it, St. Jude's?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I just remember the families were actually just amazed with it as well. Is like, yeah, my mom is just happy as she can be, and that makes me feel good. And to be honest, like I think that is a huge opportunity that whether it's PTSD or some of these hard, challenging experiences, whether it's cancer, that I think there's a lot of benefit to really be had because of that.
I think it's very, very weird to live in a world where people will look down on you for trying to make your life better by doing something that might actually help you.
Yes.
What's because it's stigmatized, you're gonna be lazy. I think that's why a lot of older people don't really enjoy the idea of marijuana or something, or don't really try it. The elderly are really getting into it, but for so
They
long,
are.
it was this thought that you were gonna be this stoner. I remember, when my grandma was slowly leaving us, we were asking, "Wanna try edibles?" And I
Yeah.
later found that edible after she passed and ate 2, and someone's like, "You're only supposed to eat a quarter of one," and I had a very, very rough night. Mostly because I couldn't stop thinking too much. Um,
Absolutely.
but, it's that thing, she's like, "Oh, well, doesn't that get you, like, I don't wanna be, like, super, like, stoner like you see on the TV," and it's like, you have this idea that it's gonna make you lazy, and then you're not gonna be productive, and then you're not gonna get things done, and then your life's gonna go to shambles, and that's the aspect because right now, everyone has this mentality of hustle, but our idea of hustle is trying to do a bunch of different things that I don't necessarily clarify as being good. Working 80 plus hours, 90 plus hours, but not being able to spend time with your kids. You know, there's a give and a take here. You know what I mean? And the world just works in this manufacture mindset. And I think you start to notice that when you start going at least into psychedelics a little bit, you start realizing like everything that's kind of around me is a little bit like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing this?
Yes.
Like I have plenty of people that I know that I've been with when they've taken psychedelics and stuff like that, and they've always asked questions like, why is this a thing? Why is money real?" And I'm like, "I have no fucking clue. I don't know, but we're doing it and everyone's doing it. So this is how the world works. So shut up and pick a damn candy bar out." Like you start to look at things a little bit more closely because I feel like it brings you to a point, not only finding who your true self is, but also realizing everything around you, getting down to the very bare bones of things. I mean, even as simple as walking outside and smelling the air. A lot of people couldn't tell you right now from just walking outside for smoking or something like that. What does the air
Mhm.
smell like? I don't know, man. I'm smoking a cigarette. So
Yeah.
you didn't take any of that in? Were there birds chirping? What's the weather like? It's kind of warm. It's like that's the only thing you really notice because it hits you in the face as the door opens up. It hits you just like one of those at the grocery store when the wind hits your face.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and I think that you bring up a great point there. I think one of the great aspects of the journeys and the experiences that I've had is I believe you're just more aware of those things. Just going outside, feeling the wind in your face. I really think they do bring kind of an awareness that as we're going along in our everyday life, that it's just you might not even think about it. And I know I'm horrible. I know I try to do some meditation and really try to live into the now, which is kind of against my personality. But again, it's like that is an instance in time where I can be a little bit more into the now. I'm much more present. So I think there's a huge benefit to the meditation and the different things like that we're starting to ultimately see now, kind of backed up by science, as a real benefit to the work life. I mean, the businesses are thriving because if the people are present, they're more focused on their jobs right here, right now, and then obviously enjoying life outside of business as well, which is something that I'm always trying to focus myself because I tend to have that desire. I mean, yes, I'm a stoner, but no, last thing I do is I'm not lazy. I'm actually probably the opposite. I need to find more opportunities to relax, to get away from business. And I do think some of these psychedelics can kind of help some people with that.
I think it's finding your dose too. For me, it's
Yeah,
always been a little bit
absolutely.
too much, but I have family members that are like, you're functioning? You're functioning?" It's like, "Yeah,
Correct.
I got shit to do, man. I got work and all this." I'm like, but you're high." It's like, whatever you would qualify as high, I don't think you understand what that means. It's about finding, like, you start to realize, like, everything around you, like, colors are a little bit brighter. You kind of start, it feels like someone takes the wool from away from your eyes. You really get to see everything. And I think there's a better form of meditation too on aspects of things. I think everybody thinks about sitting in those yoga poses. I had this
Hmm.
happen to me the other day. I just started doing was I was foam rolling my back out, and the
Hmm.
foam roller slipped out and went halfway across the room. So I just laid on my back on the hardwood floor, and
Yep.
I have a skylight. So I just looked up through my skylight, and it wasn't very sunny. It was kind of cloudy, but you get to see the clouds move through the sunlight. And I was just like, and I took a deep breath and I could just feel the floor. It felt like I was sinking in a little bit. Like I was just like, wow, like if you could really just truly just lay here and just take a pause, take a second, anything, you do that outside sipping a coffee or something. But really just focusing up on, like, we're moving, the world's moving, and we're going, and it's just, you can get a panic attack if you think too much, but you
Absolutely.
really start focusing on, like, holy shit, there's a lot of other things going on around me than what am I going to tweet in an hour, or what I'm going to say on this, or how many likes does my Instagram post get. And it's just like, whew, it's crazy.
Yeah, I really do. I agree with you. I think that our world is getting so busy, and I think our cell phones are one of the worst things we've got because I mean that just connects us to the world every single day, and it frankly it's hard to get away from, or I think it's harder to get away from this technology and being connected with everybody more so than the opposite of not being able to connect anymore. I think I would say for our parents' generations and definitely our grandparents when the technology was really just in its infancy is you could walk, I mean, you could go home and you may not see your neighbor. They might be a mile down the road. So having those connections was, I believe, more important back then. And it was more rare to get those connections where now it's like you have a Facebook, you've got a ding or some alarm going off every time you get something going on. You got your Instagram, you got Twitter, you got it all. Um, so I do, and I know at least for my life, it's kind of getting out and removing myself from those more so than connecting with people. I think that's a harder thing to do nowadays.
Like, the world's telling you to be fast paced, but then psychedelics is telling you, or just marijuana in general is just telling you why. Why?
Right.
Why are we moving so freaking quick, man? Like, what are you getting to? What is, oh, you got to go, I got to go to the grocery store. What is that in the portent of your own happiness? I mean, so many people you look at nowadays, like, I just read a article saying suicide numbers are down. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. And they're like, well, the
Hmm.
coronavirus has actually brought more people together in unity. We saw other people getting other people groceries and doing all these things in fear that they were too old or something, they couldn't leave their home. I was like, for the first 2 weeks, yeah. And it
Yes.
became a very, very tense world if you're not wearing your mask, if you're wearing your mask. And I'm like, is this someone take, can you take care, Karen, can you take psychedelics real quick? I just want to see if this is truly who you are, or something
Yeah.
everything has told you that you should be.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that there's so much that we hear from the medias and our um the Twitters and all this, and it does make you just kind of wonder. It's like, and I would say politics. I mean, there's so much of it that it's so biased or so strong intention towards one thing, and then you create an enemy on the other side because they're doing something the opposite. Where I really do. I think the unfortunate part is we are creating so many enemies because we're okay. You're doing this. Well, no, I'm not for that. Or it's unfortunate the kind of the world that we're in right now because I think it kind of is that divide and conquer. I really believe that, which in reality I'm not so sure that we're really all that far apart. It's like, yeah, I hate the masks too. They're annoying, but I understand why we're doing it. So, I mean, I think that there's going to be those areas that we can come together. But I think because of social media, the news, and all that, it's like they try to represent the edges.
You
Um,
get more attention when you show somebody their
exactly.
differences rather than showing the similarities, you know?
Correct.
It's crazy because it's so backwards because that's true. But then you look at who's appointed in our office, and it's a bunch of people that agree with each other rather than have a opinion or have a disagreement. I'm like, the whole point of making or having conversation is not there's a winner and there's a loser, but there's two different perspectives that you're trying to understand. It's not about
Mhm.
changing anybody, but trying to talk it out because that's how stuff gets done. I mean, that's what we can say, but does it ever happen, really? I mean, it's it's so tense. There's so many factors. I try and keep my social media low. I try and keep I mean, I only use it for messaging. It's why, like, when I send a message, I can come off a bit of like a dick, I'll admit it. But
Sure.
it's just after a while, it's like if you spend all day on this thing, like it becomes like, oh, you look outside, it's freaking night already. You're like, oh, it was 6 a.m. a minute ago. Why is it's 8 p.m. already? It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
because you spent so much time commenting, checking if somebody commented on your comment, and then checking and check. I see it all the time on trending on Twitter. It's like a freaking is the world on crack? Because you're
It
literally
is.
watching their Twitter and trending is like Johnny Depp. Then it's like Brexit. Then it's like Trump. Then it's Biden. And then it goes Mariah Carey's new album. And I'm like, what the fuck? Everyone's attention span's like a gerbil. It's like all
Oh, it
over the
is.
place.
Yeah. You know, I haven't used Facebook for years now, and when I guess right before I got off of it, I just remember, you know, even my phone nowadays, I actually put my phone on silent, and that was like the best and easiest thing I could have done for my own sanity. But I definitely didn't do it quickly enough. But before I gave up Facebook, I just remember, like, man, there were so many alerts, and I'd get the vibration in my phone, and it was like I could almost feel my heart rate just going up every time there was a alert or this whatever social media was trying to get my attention. And it is it our world has got so chaotic to some degree that they always want your attention. They always want you to buy something. There's always something out there. And it is, I mean, that's why I do enjoy the psychedelics is I try to put that stuff away. I try to figure out what I need. um, because it is there's so many things out there that they're trying to get what or tell you what you want, which I don't always think they got the best thing in mind for you.
You said you took it more in 2020, so more during lockdown?
Absolutely, yeah. I guess I actually believe that was kind of a good thing. I was kind of an experiment for myself because I think there was a lot of tensions, there was a lot of unknowns, and I will say even some fear to some degree of just we had no idea what this was going to mean for anybody, whether you're losing your job, different things like that. So I did kind of use it as a way to uh, maybe try to make sense of it to some degree, or try not to get so emotionally involved in all these fears, because I think there was a lot of fear mongering. I think there was
Well, the
everybody
worst
had an
movie
idea.
came I mean, it's a good movie, but the worst movie for the pandemic that came out right before it was Avengers Endgame. I think that's what everybody
Yes.
thought was that it was gonna be like a Thanos snap, half the people we knew were going to die. So, it's kinda scared into our brains, but, like, I see it as a pro thing trying it during lockdown even more because how many people were just drinking at home, doing something worse
Correct.
to themselves because they just wanted the time to go by. So many people couldn't leave their homes, and they've already binged everything on Netflix. It's like if you take even getting high, it fucking makes shit go quick or it makes shit go really slow, depending on how much you do. And let me tell you something. Either way, it's an experience where you're not even fucking thinking about the clock. You're just like, oh my God, I can feel my teeth.
No, and I think it's exactly it. It really was, I would say, a way for me to kind of accept things as best I could, because I don't think I'm any different than anybody else. Like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I don't think anybody know, and we still almost don't. But it really does bring that acceptance of, okay, the unknown is okay. And I feel like that was probably the most beneficial is, okay, be okay with the unknown. Be okay with yourself in that, hey, you do have these anxieties, you do have these fears, and again, that's okay. That acceptance, and towards others. I mean, I to me, I think that was kind of just the good or the best part of that whole experience. And frankly, I was able to laugh off some of it when I don't know if I'd have been laughing otherwise, I guess.
Would you say that when you advocate for it, I would say when you're trying to talk to someone about it, what do you typically try and help them understand? Because I think that just that fear that it gets shown in the movies is just the most difficult thing to get past because that's what we can see. The fear is someone who's never taken something like that. They don't know what that is. They don't know, they can't see it.
You know, I would say one, you start small because I think that that really is it. We know, I will say almost every single time I do it, it's completely different. I've tried to replicate different experiences and never been able to do that. So I would say one, you got to know that every experience is going to be absolutely different. I'm sure you've probably heard it is a set and setting is a big thing. Um, I've actually started kind of telling people, right, go in there with like three different mindset or three different things that you kind of want to accomplish. And for me in the beginning, I honestly believe that was kind of a lifesaver, because I'd have maybe three goals. It's like, okay, I want to one kind of tap into the emotional side of myself and have a deep conversation with my wife, or I want to I also dabble into the stock market, so I want to think about my working career, and I want to go over that, and I just want to laugh, and I want to watch. I would say like Doctor Strange. I remember was kind of a fun one sometimes because it's so visual.
Bro, if that is, I always said hell is that mirror dimension. As soon as they enter that, I'm like,
Yes,
I'd sit on the ground and just be like, nope.
and you know, in the beginning, I really wasn't sure what some of those experiences were going to be because I was like, oh man, and I can tell you, I've watched maybe the goriest movie I've ever watched. What was it? It was something either like Vikings or something where they had a very gruesome scene, and I was tripping. And to be honest, I kind of thought maybe some of that would like freak me out, and to some degree, maybe it did. But what I honestly will tell most people is these experiences are probably not going to be as extreme as you think, especially if you start small. And I think that's the best way to do it. Is know that much of the things that you hear, you're not going to fly. You're not likely to think you're going to fly. It's not going to be as crazy as you think it is. Not going to say that it doesn't happen from time to time. That there are these things that you'll look back and like, wow. Like a time I did it with a buddy of mine. He was walking down the stairs and he thought he had a spider on his arm, and he was trying to get the thing off, and I'm just sitting on the couch just watching him laughing, or I'm laughing just kind of watching what that experience was. So there are some things that you see and think sometimes that are, I would say, out there, but I genuinely believe that a lot of the things that I thought are not nearly what I expected, or I did not get the results that I expected.
Would you call it out of the blank?
I actually would. I would.
I'm
Out of the
just kidding.
blank is
I'm just
very
kidding.
a perfect example of it. And I do think that that's people have this idea of something, but you just don't know until you try it. And I think that's where it is. The negative connotations of all of it, the war on drugs. It is unfortunate. Not to say that there's not some things that we all need to watch out for, because I think that there is some people are just it's not for them, and they probably shouldn't do it. But I will say for me, it's like I believe I'm a better person because of it. I believe my career has moved in places that I don't know that I would have had the opportunity. I don't know that I'd had an opportunity to be on a podcast today had I not maybe been an advocate for some of these things.
I probably would have
Um,
found you some other way.
yeah, maybe another route. Yeah, maybe to trading or something down that road. But I really believe that there's a certain aspect of people need to try it. It's not what you've probably heard, but put yourself in the situations to succeed. I think that's probably the most thing that I would advocate is setting, find three things that you ultimately want to do, you want to be passionate about. And when you are going through a tough time or a tough experience, don't take them. That it would be make sure you're in a good mindset. You're happy as could be. You're, hey, it's the weekend. I can relax. Put yourself in a situation for these things to succeed. And I think that's probably what I'm most the biggest advocate for.
I think it's very, very hard because I think it's many different things that are influencing this bad thought of what it is. Not only the world telling you and showing you all these things that's supposed to be horrible, but every time I watch videos of people on psychedelics, you would hear them running around saying, "Where's the script?
Yes.
Where's the script?" And it's like you start to realize, like I started realizing even without it, was I was walking into the world or whatever, going to the grocery store, and people were walking like people would say their head up their ass, but it was more like they
Mm-hmm.
were like functioning off of like a movie script. And I'm like, we've been in isolation so long, people have been binging shows and movies, and now their actions are repeating things they've seen in shows and movies. Like, hey, Jim. And it's like this weird facial expression. You're like, what the fuck are you doing with your mouth? Like you're in an old Chaplin film. It's
Yeah.
freaking me out. And you start to realize, like, I was watching this video. He goes, "Where's the script? Where's the script?" I'm like, oh my God. Like, the reason why so many people might have bad trips and stuff like that is that a lot of this is scripted and your brain's trying to show you it. And it's very, very, and this is where it gets like people always bring up, which does tend to happen in some studies, is that schizophrenia is linked to psychedelics if you
Yes.
take too much, especially. But a lot of that is like, you're gonna go batshit nuts when you figure out the fucking world is the way it is. I mean,
Absolutely.
we've been living in it so long, we're used to it. But then you take a step back, people that come from other countries and come over here, they're like, what the fuck is going on? It's like, yeah, it's the same reason you have your refrigerator makes a hum. You
Yep.
don't notice that hum anymore because you're so used to it. The world was hit 6 million, whatever years ago by an asteroid. It hummed for 1 million years, they said. Is it still humming? And have we just got used to it? Have we built up these buildings to make the sound go away? I have no clue, but these are all thoughts that you could be having and you should be having in life in general. You should raise questions. You should have these questions. Don't be afraid of the answers and don't be afraid of trying to figure out what those are. For me, I have a lot of stuff that every problem I've ever had, I've just shoved it down, shoved it down.
Mm-hmm.
I have major depression from it. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I don't know if I'm ready to take psychedelics on the aspect of, I don't think right now in this time I am equipped to handle whatever that is behind the curtain. I'm
Sure.
still on that yellow brick road walking down to go see the wizard. I'm
Yep.
still on that path and I will get there. I will maybe one day dive into that. It's just an aspect of, are you ready for it? Do you feel like everything in your life has set you up to make this thing an actual experience, or is it going to turn into a bad one because you're already thinking and going into it thinking it's going to be bad?
I think you hit on a perfect thing with my experience as well. It's like, hey, if I would have, well, and I don't know that I would have actually taken LSD if I was offered it when I was in my 20s, as just as an example, or I'd say early 20s or even teens, that sort of thing. Um, but I will say, like, I think I was 29, maybe, and maybe I'm wrong. 27, 28, 29, maybe is probably when I first took my first psychedelic. Um, so for me, I think that was just a great time for me personally because one, I was ready for it. I kind of prepared myself, frankly, for the worst. And again, I was ready for the worst if that happened. So I do think, to your point, like if you can prep yourself, if you can make sure you're in that right set and setting, that really is the key to all of it. And for me, I think myself and my experience of, okay, maybe I did it almost when I'm 30, and that was probably a good thing. I think to some degree I might be wilder, so to say, because I am now taking them or taking these drugs that some people are saying, well, that's the party drug you do in your teens and 20s. But for me, I don't know that I was ready for that. Where I think being older, I used it in probably a way different way than I would have if I was just going out doing it at a party type thing. Um, I mean, we did it, and I think the first time just in our home on the couch, very comfortable place, and I just remember the first experience was we got on the bed and just laughed our butts off. And I don't even remember what it was, but I was ready for that type of situation at that point, and it was so enjoyable.
I really like hearing experiences like that, especially like my cousin. He's the one that like. I mean, I had a comedian on here, Steve Cantwell, has a crazy salvia experience. But
Hmm.
my cousin's experience, when I was talking to him about, it, he's like, "Yeah, I know it's insane stuff." I'm like, "You've tried salvia?" He talked about when he took it, he lived like to be like this 60-year-old Chinese man. And he had a heart attack in his living room in front of his grandkids, and his grandkids were grabbing his arm and calling 911, and he died in front of them. He just starts crying. And I'm like,
Wow.
yo, you really experienced that. He's like, I did. He's like, I still take it and I never can get that same trip back. He's like, it's like a dream that you really enjoy, but you can't have it. I had one recently, a dream. I'm an insomniac, so when I do sleep,
Mhm.
it's like 20 minutes, but it's like 8 years. And like in my mind, it seems how like it goes. And I had this
Yeah.
dream, felt like forever. And you might laugh at it, it's kind of stupid. But I was sitting in a car and I was looking out of a window, and there was someone driving, and I didn't look over until a little bit into the dream, but I kept asking questions. I kept asking, "What is life?" And I would get this answer like, "Life is whatever you make it. It can be good or bad, but whatever it is, it's your own." And I'm like, "That's fucking deep." And I kept asking questions, and I look over and I'm like, "Oh my God." And this is where this might piss off some people, but it was Jesus Christ. I swear to you, I cannot make this up. And I'm like, "You're Jesus Christ." He goes, "Are you hungry?" And I said, "I could eat." So then I don't know, it's just because I have a Taco Bell close to where I live, but we pulled over to a Taco Bell. I walk in, go up to the counter, I start like ordering my food. He just sits in the booth, doesn't follow me up or anything. I order my food and then I get stuck. I will admit to this. I spent most of my dream spinning the thing trying to drop a quarter to win a free burrito. I didn't realize until like it felt like 3 hours into the dream where I was still doing it, where I was like, "I had Jesus
Hmm.
Christ sitting in a booth. Hold on a second." And I went back to the booth and I sat down. I was like, "You didn't order anything." He's like, "Everything that I have is everything that I need." And I was like, "Okay." Um, Next thing you know, I get my tacos and everything. A woman places tacos in front of me. It's usually what I always get, which is like it's my brain correlating. And I know this is like I'm not religious, but I was taking this like I've heard these all somewhere, and my brain's trying to get me to rationalize something in my life. I like to write it down and try and I'm a
Hmm.
one aeronautic, I would say, which is studying
Okay.
your dreams. And then he gets a bean burrito, opens it up, and I'm like, "Is that just beans?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "But you need protein, you need like chicken, you need a vegetable, you need something." And he says, "You actually need less than you think you do." And then I was like, "That's deep too." And then he took another bite into it and it was avocado. And I hate avocado. And I just go, "Is that
Hmm.
avocado?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "You're a psychopath." And then he just goes, "Oh Lord," and then rolls his eyes. And then I just go, "Wait, are you calling your dad?" And then the dream ended. And I just woke up and I was like, "That's the weirdest fucking," and I felt like I was asleep for ages. And then I checked my phone and it was like I went to bed at 8. It was 8:20. I was like, what the hell? Like that felt like it lasted forever. But I started looking at that like there's something in that I need to keep analyzing stuff. But it was just such a weird experience. But it's something like that you can have that could really change your perspective on things, especially when you're going through something tough. And it could be as simple as seeing a butterfly fly across the street and just get missed by a car.
Correct.
Something like that can distort your perception or correct your perception on life a little bit, because right now everything is telling you that it's dark and grim, and I don't feel like that's always the answer.
I think you're right. And, you said something that kind of reminded me of a trip that I had with some friends one time. And it was their first experience with LSD. But one of them said, well, what is life? And I still think about that to this day is what is life? And I think there's a million answers, obviously, to what that could be. But it's something that I still kind of think about. And I'll never forget about that trip because that was yeah, again, something that I could never replicate. I've kind of tried to replicate that, but it really made me kind of think. Well, that's a great question. I mean, why are we here? Why am I working my job? Why do I want to achieve these goals and so much of those things that I guess I just never looked at it from that perspective. Just like a dream. I mean, we all just I'm guessing. I mean, my dreams are wild and crazy. I never know why I think what I do at that moment. But it's again, it at least gives me just a perspective, if nothing else, to analyze and see if I can maybe bring some benefit from it.
The only see, my dreams either are really super intense and crazy, or they're just like bland, but
Hmm.
they can be intense. They just I never get to that point before I wake up. It's like I remember I spent my whole dream, it felt like hours. I was just riding on a bus, but there were no seats, so I was just standing. And then
Yeah.
like everybody's like it's a jam-packed bus, but every time we'd stop and the doors would open up and shut, I'd never look out the window or look out the doors. I would just keep looking forward, and forward was a scenery, was like my town, but everything from the sides I didn't notice until later was just black, nothing. And then as the doors opened up, I was like, I think I want to get off. And I let go. And then I went to go step off. And every time it happened like 6 or 7 stops, something would stop me from getting off the bus. Like a person would get in the way, or, someone would get on. And I'd be like, oh, sorry. And the doors would shut. I'm like, I'll get off at the next stop. And then it's like this thing of like, you're letting a lot of things in and you're not giving yourself the ability to know when to step off. And it's just like fucking something simple stuff like that, where it's like there's a meaning in everything if you just take a second to literally analyze what that could be. And it's like they're profound experiences, man. There's something that
Yeah.
like it's why I like asking people about their dreams. Like there's something that can really bring to light something that's in the back of your head that you're marinating on that you're not paying attention to when you're awake.
Totally agree. And, kind of just going back to like the psychedelics, I can honestly see some of kind of that I don't know, maybe the chaos or maybe some of the unexpected. Like you just don't know what your mind's going to bring up, whether it's in a dream or it's on a trip, or even just, I mean, every day going out and getting this new experience. But I think there is some of that is kind of the same and kind of similar to some degree. It's just like that there's, I mean, it all obviously comes from our own thoughts, and thoughts are things to some degree. They're always evolving. But I would say that there is some general aspects of psychedelics and dreams that I think people can really kind of tie in together to some degree, because it's and I've heard like what your mind on LSD and psilocybin, it's your more of your brains actually tying into each other, which I will say that like sometimes my experience when we first get into it and start feeling it, it almost feels like there's too much stimuli out there. And I know, to your point of like dreams are sometimes very intense. That's kind of how I relate some of my dreams as well. Is, I mean, they're full of emotion. They're full of just the dream, and the idea is very vivid and real, which some of those aspects of like when I'm on a trip can be just use like the Doctor Strange movie. It's like, I mean, you can almost feel like you're in that movie because your mind's just looking at it at a little different perspective some days.
I think that's an important thing, man. And I appreciate you giving me your time too, James. I mean, we've been talking for an hour, man. I don't want to keep you from your work, especially.
I was gonna say I traded this morning, and it hasn't been the best last 2 days, I guess, in terms of action. So I'm definitely a little bit more free today and tomorrow than I normally like to be, I'll say. But no, it's been a pleasure being on here with you.
Is there any place people can find you that you want to promote? Any links, anything?
I would say honestly, the easiest way is probably to get in touch with me on Twitter, and I have to say I don't even know my own Twitter. So it's I guess at J and then my last name Holman 1219. I I would say that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me at this point. I do have an Instagram at James_Holman, but that's about the last things that I or the only social medias I try to do at this point. So definitely reach out to me there if anybody's interested.
We'll get to the day where someone goes, I don't have any social media. Then everyone's like, good for you. Good for you.
Exactly. You are smart.